My name is Martin Matter with the Witness to War Foundation. It is March 27th, 2014, and we are in Hiawassee, Georgia. I'm sitting with Carl Bonham, Carlbonham, who served in the Pacific Theater and Korea in the United States Navy in the navigational unit on the USS McCall. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing fine.
Terrific. My first question is, where are you from originally?
Originally, I was born in Indiana. I'm a Hoosier. And we moved to Florida. I'm an electrician by trade in private life. And so we moved to Florida. The kids was little, and so I started my trade down there, continued on, as an electrician. And we lived there nearly 30 years. And then we decided to come to the mountains, get away from all the people and all that all those cars. And so anyway, we enjoy it up here in the mountains.
That's one way to get away from people.
That's right.
Tell me about growing up and before you joined the military.
Well, I'm adopted, and my father was electrocuted when I was 8 years old, and I had a sister 6 and a sister 4, and my mother was in the family way with another one, and she was born in 1935, and my father got electrocuted in August of 1934. And so from there on, we went our different ways. I was the only one that was adopted. The two girls, they just went with people and stayed with them, but the baby was born in 35, and she's 9.5 years younger than I am, and she's still living. And she's married, and she lives in Cape Canaveral. And so we talk every day. She calls me every day on the telephone, so that's good. I got married September the 7th, 1946. Had a girl, baby born, when is Linda's birthday? August the 8th, 1947, when she was born. And 21 months later, Mark was born. That was May the 19th, 1949. And we lived in Florida. We lived in Indiana at that time. And then when we moved to Florida, well, the kids, I think they liked it. They could go barefooted 12 months out of the year. I think they enjoyed it. I think they liked it. And then the war broke out, and I joined the Navy when I was 17.
Tell me where you were on Pearl Harbor Day.
Pearl Harbor Day, I was at my grandparents' folks in Van Buren, Indiana. I was 15 at the time when on Pearl Harbor Day. And I said, when time comes, I want to join the Navy. I had a cousin that was in the Navy, so and I just sort of looked up at him and took over. And so I joined the Navy when I was 17, and I was sent. That was in before that. Before I joined the Navy, we moved to Washington State. So and then I joined the Navy in Seattle, and then they sent me to Farragut, Idaho. That's the training camp that I was in. and went through boot camp, 2 months of that. They kept me there in Farragut for 6 more months on ship's company. I was in what we call welfare and recreation, repaired bowling alleys and pool tables and all kinds of stuff like that, you know. October the 16th of 1943, I went aboard the USS McCall, and I was on the USS McCall until we decommissioned it and scrapped it.
Tell me more about your boot camp. What all do you remember about your training?
Well, I remember a lot about KP. That's where it seemed like all of us boots. I mean, we had our part at the in the kitchen doing KP duty, but no, we did a lot of drilling, swimming, hiking, all kinds of stuff like that. Just, you know, maybe not as tough and hard as the Marine Corps, but we still had a lot of training and stuff, and know how to handle a rowboat and stuff like that, you know. And we drilled with the rifles. They're wooden. They were specially made just for training, you know, the rifles were. And so I had 2 months of boot camp, and then we marched every day on the drill field, and we was inspected every day, and we had to do our own laundry and all that kind of stuff. We didn't have anybody to do it for us, and lights out at 9 p.m. and up at 6 p.m. and I in Farragut, Idaho and I went through it in February, and there was a lot of snow on the ground, snow and ice and such. So it was pretty cold. It wasn't fun, but I was glad that I had that training, and I'm glad that they shipped me out and went to Pleasanton, California. That's on a train, and we got off the train and we went into the barracks, and we was there overnight. And then the next day they shipped us out and went aboard the USS McCall.
Could you describe the USS McCall to me?
Pardon?
Could you describe the McCall to me? What sort of ship was that?
Yeah, the McCall was a destroyer, a tin can, 1,500-ton class. It was commissioned in July the 22nd, 1938. It was a ship that was 365 feet long. We had about 400 men aboard. That was wartime specs. And we had 2 5-inch closed turrets and 2 5-inch open turrets. Let's see how many, I think we had 7 20mm guns, and then we had depth charges. And the most fascinating thing about this destroyer was that we had 16 torpedoes, 8 torpedoes midshipment, 8 on each side, 8 on the port, 8 on the starboard. And we did a lot of firing with the torpedoes during the wartime. And it was, there was 100 of us went aboard the ship at the same time, and we was all polywogs, and polywogs is when you hadn't crossed the equator yet. So we had that opportunity to cross the equator, and they put you through initiation worse than what some of these here colleges have, you know, today. Boy, they take they made shillelaghs out of canvas, sewed them all up, and made them about 3 foot long, poked them with rags, soaked them with salt water, and that's what they beat us with. Yeah. And so when we got through going through all the initiation, we became shellbacks then. We was free and clear of ever being beat again. But it was an initiation that I had never been through, and nobody else had been through it either. Cut my eyebrows off, and just they mean to you. That's all there was, you know, because you were just definitely a pollywog, and so we had to go through singing a song, you know, and they was up there with a water hose, shooting that water hose on us, and sing row, row, row your boat, and you know, it just something that I don't think I'd want to go through again, but it was an initiation that was required of all men, and so and we had the king and queen of Neptune there, and the baby, and we had to kiss the baby's belly, and they had this big tub of water, and it was hooky stuff, you know. And anyway, we got through that, and then we called. They went to the dentist next. That's when we laid against the bulkhead, and they put an electric drill against the bulkhead, and went rat-a-tat-tat-tat-tat, and you can imagine what that would do to your mouth and your gums. But we got through the dental part all right, and then we had to go through this here chute, and they made this great big chute and filled it with garbage, and it was 20 foot long, and we had to crawl through that all the way to the end. And as we was crawling through, they just beat us all the way through. Come out the other end, they asked you a question: what are you now? Well, you really didn't know what to say, but he said, say you're a shellback. So that's what we did, and then we was ready for the showers, and that was during the quiet time of the war, you know. And so we started our initiation, our wartime, the Marshall Islands. We started the Marshall Islands, and we hit every island.
All right, continue.
Yeah, our first mission, we spent Christmas in Pearl Harbor, and January the 1st we headed out to sea, and the Marshall Islands was the first battle that we was in, and I was a powderman aboard ship at that time. I was a seaman first class, and the powder, I'd carry the powder to the gun, to the first powderman that was on the gun, on the 5-inch. And I really didn't like that job, but I finally got transferred to the bridge, and I became a quartermaster. So So that was good duty then. And so we hit all the islands. I've got 8 stars on the Asiatic Pacific Ribbon, along with Philippine Liberation with 2 stars, and the Good Conduct and American Theater, and so. But our biggest thing was that the USS Gridley and the USS McCall was detached from the 3rd Fleet, and we went to Guam, and we were to bombard Guam. So that's what we did. And I'm on the bridge, of course, you know, with all the rest of quartermasters and all the signalmen. Everybody was on duty at that time. And so I seen this here light flashing up on the hill, way up on the hill. And so we notified the OD, and so they, and we couldn't see what he was saying, but we sent a signalman up on the director, to the director's staff, which was did the controlling of the guns, and it had a big sight on it, and this man Tweed was standing on the rocks semaphoring, and he knew a little semaphore, so he said that his name was Raymond Tweed, and that he was on the USS Hornet, and that he was on the USS Hornet, but the Hornet that he was on, which he didn't know, it was sunk. And so anyway, he said, please come in and get me. I've got vital information. I know where all the gun displacements are and all that. So the captain, he ordered a crew to man the whaleboat. And so I wanted to go, but the Snyder, the quartermaster first class, he said, you take the wheel. So I was on the wheel. When they fired at us, well, boy, you don't know whether they're going to hit you or not, you know, because they was firing their guns back at us. So the captain says, full speed ahead, left, full rudder, and boy, we got the heck out of there, you know. But then we made a curve and turned around and came back, and we just patrolled the island that day. And we had a whaleboat that had 15 men aboard, submachine guns, and rifles, grenades, and such. And they went in, and Raymond Tweed, he said, my name is Raymond Tweed, and I'm a radioman first class, and I've been on the island for a little over 2 years. Come in and get me. And they said, of course, this guy had a beard clear down to his belly button, just about, and smelled terrible. And so he said, well, they said, would you swim out to the boat? And because we was about 100 yards off the shore. There was a lot of reefs and everything there. So he swam out to the boat, and they put him in the boat, and we went in and got all of his information that he had, where all the gunnery batteries were and everything. And so we brought him back to the ship, and they fed him and gave him a shower and all that. And next day they transferred him to the Enterprise, I think it was. I think it was the Enterprise. When they transferred him there, then a day or so later, they prepared to go in and take Guam back. So that's what they did. So Tweed was shipped back to Honolulu. Shipped back to Honolulu, and then he was sent to the States, and He'd made several commercials, Wonder Bread and stuff like that, you know, and 'cause he was a famous, Tweed was a famous man, but he got killed on a motorcycle sometime after that, and so we didn't know any more about it than that.
How had he survived on that island for 2 years?
He survived that island by running away from, I mean, he had to hide behind rocks, in the bushes. The natives helped him, helped feed him, give him clothes to wear, you know, and such as that. That's the way that he survived that. If it hadn't been for the natives of the island, he would have never made it. But they was looking for Tweed all the time. And so he was so thrilled to see. He would see different ships could go by the island at different times, he said, throughout the years that he was on there. But they would never, because they couldn't see him, and they didn't see him anyway. And but this time, he was very fortunate, and he called the USS McCall his ship from then on, you know. Yes.
And how much did he weigh when he finally got on ship?
That I don't know. He was pretty hungry. I know that. So they gave him a decent food, you know, to keep him going. Because, you know, when you don't eat rich food for a while, boy, your stomach, it plays havoc with you. You can get sick easy. But he didn't, so.
And was he there with you to watch let me rephrase that. Was he there to witness the retaking of Guam?
No, he wasn't. He was on his way back to the States. Yeah.
And what do you remember about the takeover of Guam?
I don't remember too much about taking over Guam because they bombarded it, you know, and of course they had Marines. They was, I don't know what division it was the first or the fifth. I forget what division was there at the time, you know. And we joined the fleet and back with the fleet. So I didn't know what happened on Guam.
So when you rejoined the fleet, where did you go?
I don't know what the next battle was. That was Guam. Iwo Jima. See, I was Iwo Jima on D-Day.
And you were bombarding that as well?
Yes, we bombarded.
What could you see on the island?
I could see all the island. You could see these Japanese. You can see them running all around. Of course, the Marines, they landed on D-Day. I think that was what was it? 19th of. Oh God, I can't remember what month that was now. What month are we? February, wasn't it? Was it February? And anyway, I could see Mount Suribachi. The Japanese flag was flying off of Mount Suribachi, and I could see all the Marines going in there, and a lot of them getting killed, you know. And see, that island was made up of tunnels. They could go all over that island by underground. And looked up one day, not only me, but all the other guys aboard, you know, on the bridge with me. The island opened up just slid back. It was everything was beautifully green. It slid back out on here come these big guns out on like railroad tracks, you know, and they started firing, and they happened to hit the ship that was off to our starboard side, the USS Terry, DD 515. That was the ship's name and number, and it killed 15 men right off the bat. Blood was running down the deck like water. I tell you, it was awful. We sent a crew of people over to help them out. We don't know how many was wounded. There was several wounded at that time, and
What, did the ship sustain any damage, or was it mostly just human casualties?
just mostly human casualties. They were still able to move around. I think it was forward. It was sort of forward on the ship, you know. Naturally, it did damage, but I don't know what kind of damage. You know. Yeah.
But nothing too serious.
Nothing too serious to the ship, but it was the men that they lost. You know,
It's tragic.
That's tragic.
That?
We buried those men at sea, you know, and I was trying to figure out my daughter the other day. I know that I'd seen them. They built this ramp, and they put the men on in bags, you know, and they'd put them on this board, and they'd slide them down this board, and they'd just fall into the water, and they'd sink to the bottom of the ocean. And that was those men that I finally figured it out, that was the burial at sea was, you know, it was the Terry men. Yes. Yeah, it was that was terrible. And then on the other side of the island, the Army was waiting aboard ship, some troop ships. They figured that they could take Guam in 3 or 4 days. It took 37 days. 37 days before they could secure the island, and the Marines would be relieved, and the Army would take over. I watched those men raise the flag, the U.S. flag, on Mount Suribachi. I seen that, and then after Iwo, we came back to Pearl Harbor, and then back to the States. The war was over for us. I've seen a lot of ships come back from Okinawa that the bows blown off of them. Ship was only half there, you know, stuff like that. Yeah.
Now, did you tell me about the USS Omani Bay?
USS Omni Bay, yes. That they sank the USS Omni Bay.
And where was that?
That was in the Pacific, of course. All this happens in the Pacific. You know, I don't remember the date. It might be in those papers that I've got.
It says January 4th, 1945.
Okay, that's it. That's it.
Just walk me through that experience.
Yeah, we picked up, I think it was 98 survivors off of the Omni Bay, and one of the guys, when he came aboard, I seen him and looked at him, and I said, well, I think I know that guy. And come to find out that, I says, is your name Bill Howard from Everett, Washington? He said, yeah. So I says, now he was a year in school behind me. And so I gave him my bunk. I told him who I was, and I gave him my bunk so he could sleep, you know. And then I went on duty, and sometime during the course of the night, you know, after midnight, we transferred all the men over on a cruiser. I forget the name of the cruiser, but I thought it was Baltimore or I couldn't tell you for sure. But anyway, we transferred all of those men back, and then they was taken care of by somebody else. But I never did see Bill after that. Never seen him. But he left me a note, gave me his address, his home address, and asked me if I would, you know, write his folks. But I never had a chance to write his folks, so I don't know whatever happened to him. Yeah.
And how did the Japanese think?
A kamikaze. It was a kamikaze. They, you know, these airplanes, they come in, they just fly right into the ship, you know, and do whatever damage they can do, you know.
And how close were you when they were finally
We
sunk?
were pretty close, yeah.
Did you witness it
We
yourself?
were, well, what the destroyer, no, I didn't. We the screen, you know, the destroyers is a screen, and we're supposed to keep the enemy from getting in to the battleships and into the cruisers and carriers and stuff. So but this one got through, and the Omni Bay was CVE. Forget what the number of that Omni Bay is.
99.
99. And so that was the end of the Omni Bay, and of course I was there when the Franklin was hit, the USS Franklin. You know, they tore the flight deck up on the Franklin, and it had a list of over 45 degrees, and I forget how many men they lost. Most of the men aboard that carrier. It was another disaster. And when it was kamikazes that hit the Franklin, just one after another, you know. And you can't hit the target all the time, you know. You'd like to be able to fire those guns and hit the target, but you don't do it, you know. And the 20 millimeters was going flying, and so. But that was the end of the Omni Bay and my experience with that ship.
Did the USS McCall ever come close to being hit by a kamikaze?
No, we never came close. Come close with torpedoes.
Could you tell me about that?
Yeah, that I forget the date. Can't tell you the date or time. But the carrier, the big carrier, was off to our port side, and they was after the carrier. And here come their Bettys, the Japanese Bettys, and they carried torpedoes, and of course naturally they would be kamikazes too if they had to be. Well, they dropped this torpedo, and we seen it, and it went right in front of us and right under the carrier. Very, very fortunate. I mean, that was a godsend there. I tell you, we had the angels was watching over us that day, and everybody had their eyes open, you know, always always on the alert, because you never know when the enemy was coming, when they're going to fire at you, going to drop a torpedo, or blow you up with their plane, you know. So no, that was about it on that.
So to get back to your story, you came back to the States, and what happened after you got back?
We come back to the States. We come into San Diego, I believe, and then we left San Diego. We was there in San Diego for a week or something like that. Then we left and went up the coastline. Up Mexico was right there, you know, end of the Panama Canal, and we went through the canal, but we had to wait at the canal because a lot of the ships were coming from the east coast. They was coming through the canal, and they was going the other way. They was going west. We were going east, so we had to wait till they got through before we went through, you know. And then we went through the Panama Canal and up the Windward Passage in the Atlantic and into New York City, and tied up at the dock, and I was one of the guys that was still left aboard ship when they scrapped it, you know. There was, I think, 12 men left aboard the ship, and we did our duty of just more or less taking care of the ship, you know. Yeah.
And when did you leave the Navy for the first time?
When did I what?
You left the Navy in 46, is that correct?
Yes, my time was up 10th of October. I had my time up, but I had leave and extra days, and so I left the Navy on the 10th, got married on September the 7th, 1946, in Circular Congregational Church there in Charleston, South Carolina. And we left on the 11th. 10th was my last day. 11th we left and went to West Virginia to my wife's brother, and then came home. And my time was up the 23rd of November. I had that many days left. And but once I got back home, I didn't monkey around. My dad had a job, and he was working for one single man, so he asked me if I wanted a job, so I said yes. So I was home a week, and I went to work. And yeah, my time was up, over with the 10th of October.
And tell me about when you joined for the Korean War.
Oh, they said you either join the re-enlist, or they would, you had to, or they would keep you. In other words, I went ahead and joined up reserves for the Korean War, you know, and I shouldn't have, but I did, and so that was before I got out. They said, more or less, you know, give you a warning, they're going to do this or they're going to do that, and so I went ahead and signed up, and I'm for the Korean War. I mean, for the Korean campaign, and but I didn't have to go until October. Everything's October. October the 25th, I think it was. Yeah, of 1951. I think that was when it was. They called me up. They was calling all the quartermasters. So I had to go, and then I'd just got my journeyman's ticket, and but I had to go to Farragut. No, not Farragut. Norfolk. I went to Norfolk and checked in, and then they sent me to Boston, Massachusetts, and I was to pick up the USS Fessenden, which was a DE, but it was converted. They was converting it to a DER, which is Destroyer Escort Radar Ship. And so, but in the meantime, I stayed in Boston, and come to find out that I was going to be there a while, so I called my wife and had her get the kids ready, and she drove with her mother, drove to Boston. I rented a house. I had a house all rented and everything, and so we stayed there until, I don't know, somewhere around Christmas we left Boston and went to Guantanamo Bay for a shakedown cruise. And then back to Boston. Then they shipped us then they gave us our duties. We would be permanently out of Newport, Rhode Island. That would be our station. And what we did was that we would go out to sea about 3 or 4 miles east, that's out in the water, and then we had a length 12 miles. And we ran up and down the coast 12 miles. We go one way, turn around and go back. We did that for 12 days. And that was back in the days when, they had, they was building air raid shelters and stuff like that, And so every day we would undergo tests and drills and stuff like that. And then when our time was finished, another ship would come out and relieve us, and we would come in and they would work on our ship, and we had liberty or whatever we wanted to do, for a while. And I had my wife to come to Newport, Rhode Island, and we lived down there. The kids, they swam in the ocean and enjoyed it. And then on just before Christmas, I got out. I got relieved of my duty and came back home. I sent my wife home first with the kids and everything. Yeah.
And what did you do when you finally discharged from the military?
I went back to the electrician. Yeah, I had another job. There was, at that time, there was a lot of work, a lot of jobs going on, so you could just about pick your own job. But we had to check into the hall, and then they would send you out wherever they wanted you to go. Yeah.
Just a couple more questions about your military service.
Mhm.
What's the strangest thing that you ever saw while you were overseas?
Strangest thing?
Mhm.
I don't know. I don't know any strange things, you know. Strange thing was going through that there pollywog business. That's the strangest thing, I would say. You know what I mean?
Anything impressive that you saw that still sticks out in your mind?
Well, no, we once in a while when we had they'd relieve it. We like in the New Hebrides. We was in the New Hebrides, and we would go in and anchor and go swimming and they have beer parties and stuff like that, you know. And we'd stay. Let's see, we was in the New Hebrides about a week, something like that, you know. It's not strange, not. It was just one of those things that was good for us, you know what I mean? Because we were under strain all the time anyway. But no, when it comes to that torpedo, that one torpedo that I seen go right in front of us and underneath of the carrier, that was strange. Very fortunate there.
Any funny stories from the USS McCall?
Well, everybody could grow a beard, you know. But I was 17. I was 18. That's right at the time. I could barely shave, let alone grow a beard. So, but no, we had. I remember one guy sitting on the quarterdeck. Every day he was down the quarterdeck, rubbing his head. He was chief torpedoman, and he would take his torpedo juice, which is 200 proof alcohol, you know. That's what was in these torpedoes, and he'd rub his head with it, and rub his hair. It'd grow hair, and that's what happened. That's strange, but I remember that guy sitting there every day. He was bald headed, and he finally got a little bit of hair. Yeah, didn't grow out very far, but we take on stores, you know, that's like that. You know, we go get ice cream and Coke from the carrier or one of the bigger ships, you know, and let's see. I about fell overboard one night. I mean, it was darker than pitch. You know, everything is darkened ship. You know, when you open the hatch, well, the lights go out immediately, and it was really rough. And I just finished chow, and I was down there and playing poker or something, doing something, and I left and heading for the back, heading for the stern. That's where the bunks were, and the water came over the ship, and just very fortunate there was a stanchion there. And I grabbed that, and I was holding on to it, and the water was just beating me, and I was just lucky that I wasn't washed overboard. Yeah, I don't think you ever heard that story. No, I just remember that.
Was there anybody else up there with you?
I was alone. I was all by myself. No,
And how long did that last?
it didn't last very long. It just lasted long enough to, maybe 5 minutes or so or less. But boy, the water was rough that night, and the ship was going like this, and I was holding on with my might, and I was thinking, boy, I wish somebody was around, but there wasn't anybody around. It was just me. But I was very fortunate. As soon as the ship flattened out, I ran like crazy to the torpedoes, and held on to them until I got to the back end of the ship, and down the ladder I went, and just thank the Lord that I'm still here. Because if you go overboard, nobody'd ever know anything about it, They would just say, well, he fell overboard, that's all. Nobody around,
Did that ever happen on the call? Someone fell overboard and nobody knew about it for a while?
We had, coming back from overseas, we hit San Diego, and then we was going up the coastline, and the water was just like glass, and they was and we didn't have. There was a cable that stretched around the back of the ship, and you hold on to that. And there was two of them. Well, these guys were leaning up against this cable, and this fella, the cable broke, and the guy fell overboard. And we spent all day and half of the night looking for that guy. Never found no sign of blood, no sign of anything. And that's the only time that I know of that we had any problem. But it's that there, it was scary. They should know better, but they don't. You're out there and nothing's going to break or anything. But that their cable broke, and he fell right into the water and right down into the screws. I suppose that's what happened to him. And but we never did find him. And then let's see. After that, we went through the canal. I had to wait up there. And one of the guys was telling me about they took some of the torpedoes off and put 40 millimeters in place of them. So I don't know. I don't remember that. A lot of things I don't remember. That's so long ago that it isn't funny. It's wonder I even remember anything. I just turned 88, so
Just a couple more questions. Did you have a leader that inspired you, or an individual that inspired you while you followed the war?
Well, I tried to follow my quartermaster instructor. He was a quartermaster first class. His name was Snyder, Wilford Snyder, and I tried to do what he did because he really was a good navigator and a good signalman on top of it, and I just sort of looked up at him, and after we got out of the service, he came and visited. He got married, and he came and visited us, and I stayed in touch with him clear up until he died a couple of years ago. Went to his house up in Conneaut, Ohio, and things like that, fellows like that, you do look up to. And he was only a year older than me, but yet he had a lot of training and stuff, and so I just looked up at him and our officers, we had good officers, and we had a good crew. USS McCall, it was they called it the Mighty Mac, and that was one of the finest ships in the Navy. Old, but because they was making new ships, sending them out every day. Every day there'd be 2 or 3 new ships come out, you know. And we did our share of fighting and our share of everything when it came to the Navy. We was just we did our part, and that's all you could ask for, you know. Yeah.
Did you get any valuable advice or learn an important lesson from the war that you'd like to pass on to future generations?
Well, I you know, when I went through the line to become a shellback, one of the fellows was getting transferred, and he was coming back to the States. So I asked him, not only me, but several, asked him, would you, if I bundle this all up, this package and address it, when you get to the States, would you send it off and send it home for me? Well, you know, and one thing that was in there was that certificate that I became a shellback. You know, that was a big, beautiful certificate. And so when he got transferred, he went aboard ship, and we found out later, it was, I don't know, a couple of weeks, that ship that he was transferred to was struck by a torpedo and sunk. But he was saved. He was saved. He didn't lose his life, but he lost everything. He lost everything that I had, and that's one thing I would not recommend. Hey, take it back yourself. But I figured, well, I wouldn't come back. It's just one of those things. You say, hey, you might not make it, you know. So here's a fellow's making it, but he didn't. Come to think about it, and you're probably too young to remember this, but this fella that was aboard that ship that was sunk, his brother was on an airplane that struck the Empire State Building at the same time that this ship was sunk. Now, he was killed. His brother was killed. And that was in 44, probably 44. Yeah. That their ship, was it foggy. It was so foggy. You couldn't see your hand in front of your face. And you know, they got those big lights on top of the Empire State Building. Well, I don't know what happened, but it struck the Empire State Building at the top of it and knocked the top off of it and killed everybody in the airplane, and that was a sad situation. But I wouldn't recommend sending your stuff back with somebody else.
Well, did you have anything else that you might like to add? Another story to tell, or something that might have slipped your mind?
Yeah, there is one story. I told Linda I probably wouldn't tell it, but I will tell it. God, how stupid can a guy get? But you're not that, you don't know what's what. But anyway, every day I'd get, every time we get mail, I get a bunch of letters from my folks. My folks was the only one that wrote to me. I didn't have a girlfriend or anything. So what I did, I tied these here letters all together and threw them in the trash. Well, we emptied trash we dumped trash every night because we was out at sea. And so I was called up to the exec's office, and what did he want me for? Mr. Walker, well, I think his name was Walker. I walked in the room. He says, "Are these yours?" Well, I couldn't deny it. I have a name and address right on it, you know, and my folks' address on it. I said, "Well, where did you get those?" And boy, did I get a chewing. He chewed me a new one. He said, "Never do that again. You know that could cause us to get sunk. If the Japanese would pick this up during a period of time that they was out there, they would know where we was at, and they could come right after us, you know." And I just, that's one lesson that I learned, never to do that, bundle anything up. It floated on the water, and here it was just floating around. And and thank goodness one of our ships picked it up and sent it back to our ships, and it was mine. Boy, what I did that, I feel stupid, you know. I said, "Boy, I'll never do that again." He said, "No, you better never do that again."
Well, luckily, loose lips didn't sink your ship.
That's right.
It's a real honor to get to meet you today, and thank you so much for taking the time to speak to me. But most importantly, I'd like to thank you very much for your service.
Well, you're welcome, I'm sure. It was my pleasure.